We'll note that Alder Neal and Alder Ryan are not present tonight. However, if they do either appear in person or log in during the meeting, we'll bring them up to speed as we go. The first item for consideration on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda, which includes 4 items: approving the minutes of our past meeting, November 12th of 2020, action on a preliminary resolution for 2021 street construction projects, action on a preliminary resolution for 2021 alley paving projects, and action on a no-build area easement for Pollywood Properties. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Larson. Is there a second? Second by Wadinsky. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. Consent agenda is approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on naming a segment of roadway south of Single Avenue. And you'll see you've got some packet materials indicating that we've vacated a section of roadway and closed off a driveway there. And so the staff recommendation is that we rename that section of roadway Precision Way. Alan, do you have anything on this one that you want to walk us through prior to the discussion?
No, I think you're.
Okay.
Yeah, we had, there was confusion on some addressing since when we did Town Line Road, we closed off the driveway between the railroad tracks there due to safety issues. Mm-hmm. And so now all of the trucks that come in this area need to come off of Single Avenue, and there's been some confusion on addressing. And so long-term, we felt it best to rename that roadway. Mm-hmm. So talking with Bill, he gave me a list into Marathon County because they don't like it when we duplicate names of roads for 911 and things like that. So
Sure.
So we had Bill had said through Gordon Rohde, he's here tonight as well, had asked for this road to be named. And so we made consideration and staff came up with Precision Way, and that's what we're recommending, but I think, yep.
Okay, yeah, we certainly want to avoid duplication. The whole reason they went through that exercise with the 6-digit house numbers was to get rid of some of that. So, Mr. Rohde, did you wish to address the committee before we make a decision?
Yes.
Come on up and state your name and address for the record then.
Hi, my name's Gordon Rohde, and I own the property on, which was 936 Town Line, and it was 936, 938, 940, and 950. And they closed off the roadway, and now we have to route the trucks around on the Single Avenue where the kids' playground is. Mm-hmm. As the letter that I got from Bill, there was no name for that street. They were just going to put a sign up there with an address on it. And I know that with the truckers, they're going to be looking for this, and they'll drive right up as far as Prospect and wonder where it is. So I had called Bill and asked him that we name the road and put a sign out there like most roads are. And he thought that would be a good idea. Now I hear that they want to name it the name of my tenant. I own 7 acres of property in there from Town Line all the way through till the residential area on Single. And I guess I'd like to see it named Rohde since my tenant has got 3 years left on his lease. I don't. I'm going to be there a long time. I've been there 25 years, put a lot of improvements into that property. I lost my driveway, and now I have maintenance from a lot of vehicles coming in there, which it wasn't made for. It's a gravel road. And I was hoping that the least they could do is make it Rohde. If they talked about Precision because it's a business, we run 2 businesses out of our building there. My second choice would be one of the 2 names of that business that we run.
Which is?
Secor and Rohde Motorsports.
Okay. Okay. With that, historically, when we name public spaces for individual people, and we've gone around with this with some parkland and things in the past, when we are asked to name facilities, public facilities and infrastructure for individuals, typically that only happens when that individual has made a significant historic contribution to the community. I guess talk to us a little bit about any of that history that you may have with Wausau. I mean, you'll know that in that particular area, a number of those streets that abut Grand Avenue are named for the city's founders. But we don't often name municipal infrastructure for individual landowners.
Well, I understand that. I don't know about the history of the other streets in the neighborhood or anything like that. I haven't been there for 50 years. I've been there for 25 years. And Anderson Johnson was there since 1903, and I don't see no Anderson or Johnson names in the neighborhood. And with the Precision name, it's a tenant of mine that's not going to be there as long as we are. So I would sure appreciate, first of all, Rhodey, and second, one of our two businesses rather than Precision.
Okay. What input have we had from Marathon County as far as Precision? They've already vetted Precision Way and found out there is no duplication?
Yeah, I think that there's another either Precise or something out in Stratford.
Okay.
You know, it's just a recommendation. And so just talking to Bill, he gave me a laundry list. As far as Secor or Motorsports, or I don't know, I haven't looked at those names at all. And I don't believe also that there's not a Rhodey Way or Rhodey Road or anything like that either. Those are the only, there might have been a couple others that staff had come up with. Some were duplicates, so we stayed away from those, so.
I guess I have a little bit of a concern, I guess, naming the street for an individual in this situation, particularly because we went through, in the interest of safety, this committee was asked to close that driveway. We closed that driveway, and that actually then caused a legal battle between yourself, Mr. Rhodey, or your representative, and the city of Wausau. Obviously, that lawsuit was not successful, but that is, at least in my mind, as someone who wants to recognize historic contributions to the public, when we recommend that facilities be named for an individual, a lawsuit against a municipality is not the history that you want to commemorate. So I would have a difficult time naming that street for you personally. I would be looking for a more generalized street name, just because the history that we have now, based on this parcel and its history in redesigning Town Line Road and, you know, making the infrastructure safe based on the access at that driveway near the tracks, that history now is negative. So I have difficulty as one member of the committee naming that street for you. Deb, you have a comment?
Yes, I was just going to say that there is a Precision Body and Frame in Schofield, and then there is a motorsports place out in I believe the town of Brokaw, where I had my little motorcycle fixed. So there could be, you know, some confusion in the future if somebody's looking for a certain street. But I guess I'm not sure about having it as personal thing. I would think that we would want to maintain it pretty minimum. And as Rhodey's your name, and that
Yes.
you're the way you're known, but I don't know what the history is of that for the city, and as being a new alder, I guess I would like to see if we can maybe table it and do a little bit more history to find out how that goes, because I would think we could end up with this issue again in this term.
Well,
So-
we could, and we hate to set a precedent where we like to reserve, or I think that it shows some integrity on the part of the city when we reserve the naming of public spaces, whether it's parkland, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's streets. I think that there's value in maintaining that history. I mean, part of the reason we didn't want to rename Stewart Avenue University Avenue was to protect the history of the Stewarts. And so I think that, you know, if there was a significant historical contribution that serves the greater good, then I think we'd be in keeping with past precedent. But I think we go down a slippery slope when we want to name a public thoroughfare or street access point for an individual just based on the fact that they've owned a parcel or two for a period of time. I think it's not about the longevity, it's about the lifelong contribution that's been made to the municipality and its people. And so I think maybe we would be wise as a committee to defer action on this to our next meeting and just do a little research and come back and decide if there's a more general name that we could name this particular street. How do you guys feel about that? Go ahead, Jim.
I agree that we should hold off until next meeting and do a little more research. Precision, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think that's more for a larger industrial area that should be kept maybe open for something in the future for that. Naming it after a living person that didn't give us a free 10-story building, maybe that's not a good idea.
Well, or whatever, but yeah, I mean, it's just,
So that's my view at this time, and, I mean, we could pick something related to a historical business that was there in the past, or we could relate it to something of the current landowner somehow, as long as he's been there long enough. But, yeah, maybe a personal name and the current suggestion is not quite right at this time.
okay. Why don't we do that? We'll hold, go ahead, Lou.
I guess I'm gonna have to agree with everybody on this, on tabling it, because not only that, if we don't come up with a name, that would give Eric some time to do some more research on what names we could use.
Right, right. If we could look for something that's not duplicative, but maybe a little more general,
Yes.
would be helpful. Okay. Why don't we do that? Let's set this item aside to our January meeting, and we can certainly take a second look. So, thank you for coming in, Mr.
You
Roy.
bet, thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I guess you know my thoughts, so.
You bet.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on establishing 2 additional temporary 15-minute parking spaces in the 300 block of North 3rd Street, relocating the existing 2 temporary 15-minute parking spaces within the 300 block of 3rd Street. We received a request within the last couple weeks from Compass Properties, knowing that the pandemic is not going away. We have a number of restaurants there who are serving customers for carryout and curbside. And they actually need a little more space to accommodate that because we have a number of restaurants that are real close together. And those spaces have become wildly popular as people are worried about sitting inside to eat. So they've asked that we temporarily make this adjustment to try and accommodate some more of that carryout so people aren't speeding around the block 15 times and waiting for someone to back out. So what do you guys think on this one? Go ahead, Lou.
Is this on the block where Polito's is?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep, right in there where
And
they're all kind of,
how many spaces are they asking for?
they're asking for 2 more.
2
And
more?
there was 2 to start with.
Okay, so that still leaves probably a good 8, I would guess.
Yeah, I don't exactly know how many.
Yeah.
but
There's
these-
probably 5 or 6 left after,
Yeah.
along there at least.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Okay, would you like to make a motion to approve?
I would,
Okay,
yes.
motion by Larson, second by Ryan. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members, oh, go ahead, Jim.
I think it's a good idea, because I've always thought we should have more short-term, less than 2-hour parking downtown to really get that traffic
Cycling
changing
through.
over. Yeah.
Yep, I think that'll help with a lot of their proximity. Tara?
Just so I can draft the little temporary resolution, do you want these spaces? What?
Come over to the mic a little closer. Okay.
Hello? Do
Hello.
you want these clustered together, or, so I know where to say they're going?
I think mid-block was their request, that they be together in the middle of the
Yep.
block.
So all 4 will be
Yes.
adjacent?
Yes.
Thank-
Hey, Tara, the 2 that are there, sorry, that are on the ends, they will stay where they're at.
Oh,
The 2 temporary ones will be in the middle of the block next to each other, okay?
That's how-
Yep. Okay.
Okay, and probably just north of where Chow has the valet now, right? Kind of in the middle there?
That's correct, that's where.
Like right in
that's
front
where
of
we're
Polito's is
proposing.
kind of where we'd be.
That's where the ask
Okay,
was. Yep.
perfect. Okay, so with that, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on dedication of right-of-way for the Fulton Street extension. And we've got some materials in our packet for that. Come on up, Alan.
So Fulton Street was constructed this summer, and when every year we have to report our road mileage to the state. So Fulton Street was constructed on a city property, but it was never actually dedicated as right-of-way.
So
it's
like official map type
Right,
stuff?
it's just a
Okay.
formality, so we can update the official map, put it as right-of-way, and then we can collect money from the state for road mileage.
Awesome. All right, housekeeping item. Do we have a motion to approve this dedication? Motion by Wadinski, is there a second? Second by Ryan. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Aye.
None are opposed, motion carries. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on potential capital projects using unspent 2020 funds and prioritization of funding. And we've got a list here from Alan, if funds become available, of some extra work we might be able to do here. Do you want to walk us through that?
Sure, I think
Awesome.
Eric can step in too. He's more familiar with the budget process and what might be available. And so this was just kind of a little bit of brainstorming with Eric where we could, obviously we could use more money in a lot of projects, but this was kind of our priorities. I listed it as the 2021, the budget we have approved, and then, if funds become available. Now, the total on the bottom is 830. We're not sure how much will be left over, so that's kind of an estimate. So we kind of put some numbers to it. It's a starting point. So I guess that's up for discussion by this, if it comes back $500,000, and we have to trim this, I guess we'd like priorities to look for.
Sure. Is this project savings out of your prior department street budget, or is this expecting city surplus?
This is expecting city surplus,
Okay.
at the end of the year. So one of the thoughts is that the different departments would establish, some ideas for that. And eventually the city council would, determine where those monies are spent. But these are just some projects that we came up with for 2021 for you to look at and possibly prioritize tonight. That way, whenever those carryovers and stuff
I
are established.
expect that we may have to trim right away, only because when we talked about this Tuesday night in finance, when we were talking about the potential for carryover and surplus requests in the first quarter of next year, I believe Mary Ann said she expected the surplus to be about 600,000, and that's not knowing yet where we finish with snow. Knock on wood, we don't have any yet, but we may have less than 830,000 to use, and we don't know what other interdepartmental needs there are. So we may have to cut a little bit right away. This is kind of speculative, but I think we
For
should
sure.
know on the front end that we may not get anywhere near 800, especially if other departments have critical needs.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure what the committee, I just wanted to give you some ideas of some of the projects that we could do, because it doesn't sound like the carryover we're really going to finalize until March or even April. So, like full street reconstruction projects are kind of off the table because there's just not enough time to get those in. So now, so some of the other ones that we can adopt and work into the construction plan for 21 are these types of projects. And so just food for thought if you have certain priorities or.
The good thing about the 2021 budget is it's the first one in a long time where all of the street projects that we asked for made the cut, and that we didn't have to go back and remove entire streets to get our mill rate to where we wanted it. So, I feel like we have a decent amount of road projects going forward, and that we did not cut them, and we kind of picked them to make sure that they're spread all over town so that impact is diverse in a number of districts. But I think that one thing that we had on our CIP list that we weren't able to fund, that we really know that we wanted and needed, was the facilities plan for DPW. We've talked about that. There's employee concerns. They're having retention and recruiting issues based on facilities being so crunched down there. And so I guess it's just a matter of us deciding, where we want to go. And, if we wanted to go back to that unfulfilled CIP list, if there's money available, and get the plan going on that new facility. Because there is a really nice plan, but it needs a lot of engineering before it's ready for prime time. What do you guys think? Lou, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We were just at a meeting last night down with some of the members of the Public Works Department, and I have toured the facility, and I've also been in a lot of the other facilities around town. I've been into Kenworth Garage down by Mosney. I've been into excuse me, the Wausau Truck Peterbilt Garage down there. I've also been out on the International Garage, and you know, it's the facility we have for the equipment we have today is simply Stone Age. It's no other way to put it. It's outdated. They can't fit a lot of the equipment in there because of they can't get it in there it's either can't get it in there to turn it or the building's not high enough. I really think that is the heart and soul. You know, many people think, you know, we're always giving stuff to the fire department. We just gave new guns to police the other night. We really, really, really need to do something here. We have millions of dollars of equipment sitting outside that should be underneath roofs.
Yep.
Trucks are stacked up. They got to move 5, 6 trucks in order to get one vehicle out in the wintertime. It's really a sad state of affairs, and we really need to move forward with this as quickly as possible. Thank you.
That's my feeling too, because, you know, we every year go through, we do a lot of streets, we do a lot of asphalt overlay, we fill an awful lot of potholes, we do concrete joint repair. I mean, we already have an extensive budget for those items. Not to say that we certainly couldn't use more, but at what point will that facility ever score its way up CIP any other way, I guess, is what I ask myself. Mayor, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that this committee and the public also knows that we are working on a fleet kind of study, talking about all of the cars that, every car in the fleet. So there was a lot of talk about that garage and being able to use that fleet study to understand more about what DPW will need so that it will be a little bit more joined together and those projects can move forward together instead of doing one thing, deciding maybe you don't need as many cars or something like that. So just so you know that it wasn't stopped, it's still part of that discussion.
We were expecting results of that study early next year, right? First quarter?
Yeah, I just had an
That's
update
correct.
on it recently. I
Right.
don't remember the specific date. though.
So assuming that as a committee, if we wanted to prioritize that facility about that time that the study wraps up, it would be good to have the money to get moving, you know, once we know what what the study reveals in terms of, because the study was to take a look at the plan that had already been designed and verify that it truly met all the needs. If it does, and the changes to it are minor, it would make sense to move forward on design. You know, Deb, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm not familiar with the facility plans. Somehow I'm not. And I'm sorry about that, but I guess I would also be interested in what the study comes up with at a certain point. Are you better to have a second location just in case that there is some congestion or some type of fire or explosion so that you have an alternate location? And to me, we've got the Sears building that could be retrofit and be in the neighborhood.
Well, we don't own the Sears building.
Well,
Wausau owns the Sears building, so.
It's something that, since the city is looking at tearing it down.
Right, but if we take it, it pays no tax. We'll take
I
it.
understand,
Right.
but still, it's an empty building at this point, and in an area that I don't think anybody else wants to be across the street from the jail, in retail or in housing. So I guess I would like to see if, from the study, if there's some alternatives and looking for a second location so that one way, if you're all backed up, and I just recently got rid of some small pavers. I was over in your area this week. It just seems like with all the traffic and the construction and that, having a second location may be helpful.
Go ahead, Lou.
Is there still plans to purchase that Wausau engine building? Believe that's down there too. They were looking at purchasing some property down there. I believe the guy was retiring and was going to sell it, and so that would give us more room down there too.
Correct. We've been in conversations with the owner, the son, and he is willing to. But, you know, and so those have just been discussions at this point.
Because I honestly believe, you know, in looking at some of the facilities around the area, like the one we were just at, Eric, I mean, what we have could fit a building that size.
Yeah.
you know, and still have the amount of room, the space to turn, to get into the buildings and stuff, you know.
Well, and I think
so-
the goal is to accommodate, there needs to be, there's synergy to be had between having the wastewater treatment facility and DPW kind of co-located. There's value to be had with the two of those things existing together. And they need a fair amount of space to store. You can't just put them anywhere because they have to store, you know, tons of road salt. And they have, you know, also, they make noise down there and they have vehicles in and out, big vehicles. And if that kind of stuff is in a neighborhood and in the wrong spot, neighbors will not enjoy that. And so I think that the site that they have, if it could be made a little larger with some minor land acquisitions from adjacent properties, might be a cheaper way for us to go rather than to try to acquire land for either a whole new site or a secondary site where we have to go out and try to buy land from the private sector. That could be difficult. So, you know, I think I'm waiting to see the study too. I'm anxious to see what their thoughts are on the plan that was presented. But as a committee, I mean, this is kind of hypothetical, so assuming there would be surplus available to us, would we want to direct our staff to try to secure funding for that facility plan? And I know we just talked in finance the other night about LED light conversion, because we save so much on power with that. You know, and you could get the downtown done for $75,000. That was on this list too. You know, and we had talked about maybe trying to make our way through a, you know, citywide transition over a cycle of, you know, 5-ish years if we could take it in bigger bites. Is that something that we're interested in? You know, and obviously if we had project savings from other areas, we certainly could look at a little extra overlay. I mean, in terms of cost for overlay, asphalt overlay, doesn't 150,000 basically get us maybe a couple blocks? I thought that wasn't that about $80,000 a block for overlay, Alan, or is it less than that?
It really depends on what type of overlay we're doing. Whether doing a full mill and overlay or a partial.
Or a skin
Yep,
top?
depends
Yeah.
where we're at. So, yeah, the 250 is a light budget for this year, but it is, you know, it is what 150 would help.
Yeah.
We have some major, something we're gonna have to think about in the future, is just driving around looking for streets. If everybody drives Bridge Street from basically 3rd Avenue all the way to 17th, that's 4 lanes wide plus all the turn lanes. That really needs an overlay. All 4 lanes plus so you're probably talking $500,000 right there just for that stretch. So
Right, and so that's
to
why
keep in mind in the future, there is a big need for asphalt overlay in this community. Not that this 150 would do that, but.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going with it, was because, you know, when we look at what our biggest bang for our dollar is if we would say take 150,000 and divert it to overlay, so in our massive backlog of infrastructure, we get maybe a block or two. But if we were to prioritize, say, this, addressing the needs of this facility, which have been kind of kicked to the curb for 10 years, once that problem is solved, it stays solved for decades. That facility problem, which, I mean, we've had hiring and retention problems there for a while, and it's been a common complaint for almost as long as I've been on the council, which is a long time. So,
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
If I may?
Yeah, please.
And when we were at that meeting last night too, they were also saying that they were in the process of repairing a boiler from 1960.
isn't that sad?
So that's how old and how outdated that facility is.
It is, and that's a facility that I think when we get to the point where we're maybe a little further past the pandemic, one thing we've done with prior councils is we've had the council take tours of facilities, which has been super helpful. We've had them tour water, we've had them tour wastewater, police, fire, we've had them tour DPW before. We used to take the CIP committee to the DPW and walk them around so they could understand what the needs were, because on paper, it's hard to visualize. And so I think that any of us can benefit from taking a tour of that facility and seeing it really, I mean, as far as storage and logistics of getting equipment in and out, that's a puzzle that they put together like every day. And so it needs to get addressed, you know, and we were hoping that before we would roll out our full-blown new facility plan for down there, that we would at least be to the point where we've at least paid off that first swimming pool that we built, if we can remember back in the day. We phased those in, and they'll be paid off in order as well. And so that day is coming, but we need to get the engineering done and get things shovel-ready if we plan to ever move forward on something like that. And the design engineering is a big part of that. If we could get that for 325, that seems like a decent use of a surplus for us.
Madam
Go ahead.
Chair,
Yep.
I'm all for setting aside money for the new DPW and whatever we can do, because Deb, Miss Alder Ryan, if you haven't gone down there and toured that, or any of the aldermen's, I would highly suggest you go down there. And then if you can, go look at an International Garage or the Peterbilt Garage, and then you'll see what.
It's night and day.
What a cave it is. Thank you.
Yep, it's night and day. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I would be for putting some money toward that project if we have it. That'd be a great idea, but I really think LED lighting should be a top priority also for us, because if we can put more LED lighting in and not have to up the cost to the citizen, it's gonna save us money in the long run.
Yep.
So I'm about the money.
Well, it's brighter, it's dimmable, and it's safer too. I mean,
It
it's
makes
just.
the area
it's
safer.
So much better.
And it saves the constituents a few dollars. And that's what it's about, save some money.
Well, and on our list, if we would say circle those two items, those add up to 400,000. If Mary Ann's projection was right, and we're looking at maybe a surplus of 600, I think that we would be pretty aggressive to try to earmark 8. I think maybe we should be conservative in our guess, and if we find out that we get more money than we expected, we certainly could come back to our work list here. Go ahead, Jim.
That's a good idea, and if we do get more money, I would say stick it both in those two projects again if we have to, because the more we put LED in, the more we're gonna save.
Right, and it's kind of a one-time fix too. Once it's done, that stays done. I
Exactly.
look for problems that we can solve and like be done with that. And infrastructure is cyclical, only lasts so long, but Deb, go ahead, and then Lou.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think it's also the LED, not necessarily just downtown, because you do have all the other businesses with their alternative lighting, where I think out in towards the neighborhoods, it would be such more of an impact and give, but also within the buildings, and then I would think there might be some incentives, Eric, from Focus on Energy as a way to do this. I guess for the average home LED bulb, it's 18-year lifespan, and then you're reducing your electricity by like 75%. So to me, the more we can get into that, I guess I just don't know what the extent is. Is this something that city staff, as electricians, or as a project, we get more electricians, for a few years on a
The retro-
contracted basis? Or is it something that WPS would have to do?
No, the downtown is like the decorative browns you see around the 400 block or all the way up and down Third Street. So those would be converted over, the $75,000 would be to convert all the ones downtown that are not, that's to buy the materials, and then our electricians would swap out. It's basically take the globe off and they swap out the guts or the mechanics on the top. We do that, the electricians do that in-house.
Okay, because it happens on, I think, Fourth and Elm. We had it swapped out within the last year or two. Dennis ended up getting it done. And I know it was a WPS staff person that did that work. I happened to see him and talk to him
On the
at the
light,
time.
on the light poles, doesn't Pub Service change those for us?
The wood poles at the intersections, those are WPS poles, so they would swap those out. But the decorative ones downtown, the city owns those,
Those
WPS
are
does
a
not.
pretty cheap convert though too, aren't they, on the existing poles? I mean, they're not super
I
expensive to
don't,
change those
yeah,
out, are
I
they?
don't know what WPS charges for those. We-
It's
you
gotta
know,
be
we-
way less than what ours are.
We do have another LED conversion project that got approved as part of the 21 budget. That is all those incandescents on First Avenue from Stewart to Thomas.
Yep.
So that did get approved. Those are those big Cobra overheads.
Yep.
Okay,
So those are in the budget, so those will be converted to
Well, and those are
LEDs.
so much better, even in areas where you have a full tree canopy. Even if you don't add lights, that LED is so much brighter. It really enhances people's perception of safety and walkability at night. And, so many times you think, do we need to add lights to a street? But sometimes you don't. I think that conversion can get you that extra light purity that you want. I think that I'd like to see us as a committee come up with a plan, or at least have our engineers come up with a plan where, we could look at a sector-type approach to kind of, maybe we start in the middle with this LED conversion and then work our way out and, try to take larger bites, maybe get, whether it's neighborhoods, I don't really care if it's neighborhoods, districts, whatever, sectors, however we want to approach it, but see if we could take bigger bites, even on the wood pole fixtures, and start to cycle those through and see if we could get a big mass of it changed out within 5 years. Because the energy savings is tremendous for us.
Well, I'd like to see sooner than later, but I guess I would encourage you to do a further study and see, and with the one at Fourth and Elm, it was because it was burnt out.
Yep.
So at a certain point, I don't know if there's something could be worked out with WPS to get it done, or take the responsibility back to the city and then get her done. But it just seems, we know it's about 500,000 or more each year. And that with LED, it's not necessarily new, it's been around at least 10 years or more. Every bulb in my house is LED. And if we could have a 75% reduction in our annual cost.
That may pay for a lot of the project
Well, it
right
may
there
pay
over
for a
time.
lot of just the regular increases the city has. And if we qualify for some focus on energy as well, just because of the sheer undertaking.
Right. Well, and even if there's other environmental grants available, I mean, we'll have to see what happens, but I think, anytime we can go to a more efficient fixture, there may be sources out there that we could, get some help that we've not even tried yet too. I mean, that's worth looking into as well. So, Jim, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
The light went out by my house this summer. Took them a month to get there. But when the WPS truck pulled up, it was a smaller truck with the man lift, and he went up, changed the light, came down, talked to the neighbor for a little bit, and it was done. That took him 10 minutes.
Sure.
So if we could even, the decorator ones downtown are a great idea, because let's get the downtown looking good and lit up so we could reduce crime and make it nice. But let's maybe think about doing the entire city on an accelerated basis, because the neighborhood lights and the poles don't take them long to do, and maybe we could get some WPS assistance with that.
It's worth a try. Go ahead, Alan.
I think we pay a flat rate per pole to WPS, so
Yep.
they make the decision when they change those out. So we really wouldn't get any cost savings if they change those out. It is a brighter light, it does light the intersections better, so we can talk to WPS, see what their plans are. I think when they burn out, they do them, but I don't think they have an active program to replace them.
It's such a scatter approach, and I wonder if we could partner with them to see if we could get, and maybe split the city up into 10 zones or something, and see if we could get them to at least work with us on a couple of zones each year. I mean, I know they're busy, and their workload is full too, but maybe we could get a partnership together with them. Jim?
So the replacement is a contract with them, I understand that, but our electric bill still goes down, correct?
No, there's a flat rate for the WPS poles,
So if we change LED, we pay the same rate.
yes. That's
Well-
my understanding. I guess, I don't want
Let's
to
not
speak
change
out.
any of them and let them produce more power for us.
I guess we could come back with, like in January or February, we can talk to the city electrician and maybe come back with some more better information. That's kind of unprepared to talk about this, but our city electrician's a lot more familiar with it, so maybe Eric and I can come out, talk to our city electrician, maybe have a better report for you in January or February.
I think that'd be a good idea, because that'll help us prioritize this list a little bit too, and we'll know a little bit more by then too what the surplus looks like. But I mean, we certainly don't have to decide tonight, but go ahead.
Could a representative from WPS maybe come to one of our meetings and talk about that?
We can
You can ask.
We can talk to them and, as staff and get their,
Sure.
get their policy on it.
I mean, they're always wanting to talk to citizens, get them
Yeah.
involved in.
I can ask if they want to show up during the meeting, sure.
Right, well,
We can
and
make a request for that.
that's the thing, and I think we're looking, I mean, not so much that we would ask them to prioritize the project, but if they would at least partner with us on a sector here and there, so that we could make a larger impact, because I think right now, if you wait for fixtures to burn out, you end up with a scatter approach. So in every neighborhood, you might have one, but then everyone else wonders, well, geez, why couldn't you just do the whole thing? And, they don't quite understand the progression of all this, so, I mean, if we could at least speed that along a little bit, and, if you're gonna do one, do the whole block. I mean, a lot of residential streets have lights at the corners, they're not everywhere, so,
Yeah, I think the other thing too, the city's been working on this for a number of years, and, like, we do look at the high density of lights downtown and then the other low-level decorative that are throughout the city, and so those are the areas we focus on. The other things that we've been focusing on are the ramps. And right now, we have all the lights and everything ordered for the Jefferson ramp, which will be converted over. And that actually, we had gotten a Department of Energy grant to help pay for those, and, plus then we get the rebates as well, so.
Well, and those are some big light bills out of those
Yeah,
reps, so.
yeah. So we've been doing fairly well as far as those high dense areas with the lights and the changeovers, yeah.
Lou?
I live in a neighborhood where we have no lights at all in our blocks, like you said, Alder Rasmussen. We just have them on our corners and our blocks in our neighborhood, my forgotten neighborhood. We don't have any lights in the middle of the block. It gets awful dark, and we don't have any sidewalks and we have crummy streets. What does it take for the DPW or Public Works to put poles in the middle of our blocks?
We have a policy established, and you can request lights at intersections or mid-block if it, this committee did establish a policy for where we place streetlights. Not the decorative, those go kind of project by project, but like on an existing street, I think they're pretty much, the policy is to put them at every intersection. So if an intersection doesn't have it, a citizen can request it.
So what you're saying, Alan, is there's no policy for putting a mid-block?
There is, it's based on length. Like if it's only, and I don't know exactly what that policy is, but we can bring that back to you too.
The other thing was
Could you
that-
please?
Yeah, so I think it's like if
Yeah.
it's 500 feet between intersections, then the mid-block one is allowed.
And then
So-
I think if the street either curves or turns too, where
Right,
they
and
had an
there's- and
apex
there's-
where you put one, because I live on a curve and we have one at the edge of our driveway, which is mid-block, but often when we had residents that would come to the committee looking for a mid-block streetlight, a lot of them historically, at least early on when I was on the committee, got denied because the street was too small and there was no, people would come in with a petition from every neighbor on the street because their street was too dark. And it was really because they had those incandescent fixtures and a full tree canopy. And when you change the corners to LED, sometimes it solved the problem that they had mid-block just because there was so much more light. And, but the mid-blocks, a lot of mid-block lights got denied. But,
So those requests all used to come to this committee on CISM, and then this committee established a policy. And now those requests for streetlights come to staff, to the electrical department.
yeah.
And then the staff uses those guidelines to establish whether we request a streetlight from WPS there or not.
So, in other words, what you're saying, Alan, is if I came to you with a list of streets, it would be talked about at CISM, or you would look at it?
The electrical department would look at it based upon the guidelines that were created at this meeting. So they would, if somebody requests one mid-block, we'd look, well, what's the distance to the next one? So they would either say yes or no, and then they would talk to WPS. Now, the issue with that is sometimes WPS has overhead poles, and it's not a big deal to put a light on it. But where it becomes an expensive venture is if there's no overhead poles in the area and there's no electricity, so then WPS sometimes has to run power to them. So there is sometimes it's relatively cheap, because WPS isn't gonna go put a light out there if there's not a pole. They're gonna charge you to put a pole up. They're gonna charge you to run power to it. But if you made a request, or any citizen made a request for a light, it would be rejected or accepted based upon the guidelines created by this CISM committee. And I can forward all those to you guys, those recommendations.
Send us that criteria, because we created that a long time ago. Those streetlight requests, actually early on, and I want to say it was maybe 2009, 10, 11-ish, the streetlight requests were starting to get to be like stop sign requests. There was all kinds of spirited discussion, and we were put in an awkward position between the electricians and the engineers and the neighbors. And so we decided we needed a consistent process, and that's when the criteria came along for, evaluate the distance. If it's a real long stretch and there's no light in the middle and it's just not safe for people to walk and whatnot, that's when they were starting to put them in. So, and we found then that some of the mid-block requests, more of them were getting approved that way with consistent criteria than coming in case by case, because it just was a way more efficient way to handle it. So, but we could certainly look at that. Jim?
When the LED light was changed at the corner by my residence, the mid-block neighbors said it made a great difference and lit up their area also. So maybe that would be a first step before we go into the expense of putting mid-block ones. At least try that first, and then go on. And my second thing I'd like to say, when we bring this back, I guess I have a question with the electricity and the WPS and what we pay. You said the neighborhood lights is a contracted rate. I'd like to see if that is correct. And the city-owned lights like downtown, where the decorator ones, are those different? Do we save money when we put LEDs up?
We do, they're metered.
Yes,
Yeah.
because those are city-owned lights. Any decorative light you see around the city, like these out here in front of City Hall, those are all owned by the city. So anytime we change them over, we directly save that energy savings.
We should put more money to that then.
Yeah, and so I mean, if we would look at just tentatively, if we would circle those two items we talked about tonight, that's 400-ish thousand. And if we find out that there's way more available than that, we certainly could have this discussion again and come back to this list. But for now, I feel like we'd be pretty bold to ask for 830 when the whole city may not even have that much money. Go ahead, Deb.
Jim, I was just going to say that one of the issues is the new but old-fashioned looking light poles that I had thought on past streets that we had done downtown, that some of them were like $6,000 to $8,000 a pole. So compared to the overhead, which still could be converted, I understand, yes, you know, it's nice to have the newer LED, but when you look at the cost of the pole as well, and we can't afford it all over town, that there could be some retrofitting of the overhead at a savings too. But I think
understand
we should get WPS involved and maybe renegotiate. Just happens, as a volunteer for Habitat, I ended up working on some grants with WPS where for the Habitat homes, they got a high energy type of appliances. And throughout their other programs, they are promoting energy conservation. So it may be something we could revisit
Yeah.
and maybe something better could be had.
Okay, Lou?
I just have a question now. When you say decorative lights, this First Avenue project that was just recently completed, they took out all the new lights and put in, I counted 70 decorative lights along that stretch. Are those city-owned then too, or?
There.
Yes.
And were the lights prior to that city-owned? The lights
don't think those- that
were the
only
lights
had overheads, didn't it?
pre-road construction project, were they city-owned?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I think if they were at the intersections, they were WPS owned. I mean, anything new we've put in the last probably 8 years has been LED. The technology's improved, but obviously anything we put in now is LED.
I
You know,
guess-
if you look at Thomas Street, Town Line, even all the big Cobras all the way down Grand Avenue, those are all LEDs. So,
And boy, did those make a difference.
And I'm not here to disagree with you, but I mean, to remove public service-owned poles, put in 70 city-owned poles that we probably could have got by with 35 on that block, you know, it just, it seems like a horrible
They
waste
had-
of money.
Well, when we looked at that project originally, they had some very serious safety concerns down there from a traffic and then from a pedestrian standpoint. And I think that district actually had asked Alder Nutting to look at better lighting in that area. And so when that project came forward, they were pretty vocal with him that they wanted to see improved lighting there just to increase the perception of safety for people to be out at night in that neighborhood. And so that, and well, the one thing we found out too with Third Street, I mean, a lot of people when Third Street got done thought it looked like a runway. Those particular lights, I think when we went to install them over on Scott Street, we found out that they, based on their height, need to be closer together because they don't throw as much light as those great big tall ones. So it takes almost twice as many of those small ones to get the same effect as a whole bunch of Cobra heads.
Well, then
So,
don't put in the small ones.
well, aesthetics would dictate that.
Yeah.
right, I mean,
Right.
that's always, I mean, it came to this committee
Mm-hmm.
on First Avenue, what kind of lights to put in. Was it, Cobra heads? I mean, that came to this committee. It came to the committee on Thomas Street too, so.
Right.
I think it's always a balancing act, you're right, And you're right that the smaller ones need to be closer together just because they run their lighting calculations.
Right.
The lighting engineer runs it to keep it consistent because it's dangerous to go from shadow to light to shadow to light, so.
Right. Well, and I
It
think
seems
when that
overkill
neighborhood came
sometimes.
forward too, the River District, West Side River District, wanted a different look. So those lights look different than what's downtown on purpose because they wanted to create a sense of place and a perception of safety, but they didn't want to look like downtown. they wanted these other ones. And for some reason, I thought those that we put on the west side were actually a little cheaper than those brown ones. When we looked at the price, I thought they were less.
I think they're about the same, and,
Were
you know,
they?
just for cost, Deb, it's about $5,000 a pole. That includes the wire and the conduit. But when we're budgeting, if we look about $5,000 a light for the whole street. But, you know, we can go more into detail, I guess, on the next committee meeting, and maybe meet with WPS and get the electricians involved and
Right.
give you guys some better answers. And in the meantime, I can forward you the existing guidance for putting new overheads at intersections or mid-block.
Well, and I think it helped us a little bit on First Ave when we installed some of that too, that street actually was able to secure STP urban funding that when we first started talking about doing First Ave, that street was not proposed for STP urban funding. But when we lost that funding on Thomas Street, we then submitted First Avenue as an alternate, and that street was accepted. So, you know, I think we were able to make a more substantial investment in the aesthetics of that street, just to give it a sense of place, just because it borders the river and is at the north end is part of that west end near West River District. So just to give them a little boost, the neighborhood was really appreciative of those. So, but that's something that we can look at with any street project. And we always look at, when we do a street project for a complete rebuild, one of the things we want to look at is light. Is there enough light? Is it perceived to be unsafe? You know, and we started to look at that a number of years ago from a standpoint of, you know, are we bike and ped friendly enough? Is it well lit or not? And, you know, what changes might we need to make rather than just replacing what's there with the exact same thing and leaving the same old troubles? So, Deb?
Yes, I guess I wanted to change the subject now. It ended up, I heard from Seth in my neighborhood on 11th Avenue. He's lived in Wausau for over 5 years, and that he's very close to wanting to be using and crossing to going to Marathon Park. But his concern, and talking to some of the other neighbors, which like, with pandemic, I guess I feel a little out of touch with as well. But it's amazing me to hear that Stewart Avenue neighbors do not feel that it's safe anymore to cross Stewart Avenue to get to the park.
We haven't
So-
wrapped up the light item yet, and we don't have Stewart Avenue on the agenda, but we certainly can
Well,
put it on for a future.
it was regarding signals or potentially what do you
Oh,
want to do
okay,
for
okay.
next year. So,
Signal upgrades?
so I wasn't sure how, would you consider this as, you know, maybe a study to do a signal upgrade, but he was mentioning about, could there be, you know, for him crossing with a stroller and his dog, that he was thinking about the push button, that might be, if that would be an option.
Heads? Are we talking about 12th and Stewart, or what corner are you talking about?
Well, I think he's talking about 12th and Stewart, just, you know, the entrance to get into Marathon Park.
We've talked about 12th and Stewart a number of times in this committee, and for some reason, I thought the DOT needed to be involved in that discussion, or was that not the case?
Yeah, they do.
Because Dennis brought that in last
I
year.
know Alan has talked to the DOT about some improvements and stuff there and what some possibilities are.
Right,
on
because when we
those
took the parking
crossing
and put in the
lights.
bike lane and whatever, we had looked at signalization there, and for some reason, they weren't doing it. But at that point, that was, because it was a connecting highway, I thought we had to have them with us on that. Where did we leave off with that, Alan? Because, you know, when we moved that driveway at John Muir and everything to try to clear that up, we had looked at signals there, and we had looked at stuff like walk bridges, and I thought we determined that a walk bridge to get where it needed to be for ADA access was going to be, you know, a mile long to get to the right grade.
Right.
There was all kinds of discussion at 12th and Stewart before.
Yes, so it is a connecting highway, so it'd have to go through signal warrants, and when we did those several years ago, it did not meet signal warrants.
Okay.
So,
signal upgrades is, in a general sense here,
Yep.
with the way they're
Yeah,
on the
and I-
list, wouldn't be that street, though.
no, like I said, it really didn't explain that. Signal upgrade, so, what we did, if anybody's, I'm sure y'all are familiar with Town Line and Grand Avenue, that intersection out there. I'm talking where there's existing signals. So if you remember, there was, if you tried to make a left turn going south on Grand to go east onto Town Line, it said it only operated between like 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Well, it was another, and so that was like timed into it, and it wasn't very, efficient. And also, people trying to come out of the church would never get, so we had to time it out so that it always went for those people to go. So what we did is, if there's a new technology out there, maybe it's a little long-winded, but so we tried it out on that intersection where we put pucks in the ground. It's actually like a hockey puck.
Oh,
So you drill it in, instead, so the old way is you put loops in the pavement, correct? When you rebuild it, or else you saw them in. And it's very inefficient, because then you have to run conduit, and then you have to put pull boxes, and you have to run wire all the way back to the cabinet. So this new technology, what I'm talking about, these signal upgrades, is they put a puck in the ground, and it's got a battery, and it lasts about 7 years, even in our weather. And it transmits up to the pole and to the cabinet. So we did that on Town Line. It cost us about $7,000. So now that left turn lane is activated. We have pucks in the church parking lot. And for about $7,000, we were able to activate. Whereas if you would have had to put in loop detectors, put in boxes, but it would have cost a lot more than that. It would have been traffic disruptive. We were out there for maybe an hour in the morning, sawing those pucks in, and we were done.
Wow.
So DPW, our electricians, they've been really forward-thinking with this, and they wanted some more money to upgrade some more intersections to put those pucks in. Like Second and Scott down here, they wanted to put some to actuate that. Some turn lanes on Bridge Street. So that would be just signal upgrades like that. And I could,
Sure.
if we do have more money, I could say which intersection. I mean, I could have a better report on which intersections they were
Sure.
doing.
Go ahead.
Seth's concern too was that he is a nurse that likes to work as well, and that he had said, maybe another alternative would be to reduce the speed, because on Bridge Street, he has no problems crossing. And he was thinking, is there a way we can do some type of signal or reduce the speed to 25 miles per hour? So I just thought we should be bringing it up again.
Yeah.
And for my neighborhood,
It could be.
Marathon Park is so much better than Reservoir Park.
Yeah.
I can't blame people for wanting to get over there and enjoy it.
We could, I guess, at some point, maybe after the holiday, revisit the discussion of 12th and Stewart, and then as a standalone matter, because there's so many variables there that come into play. And, like I said, there's a lot of DOT requirements and whatever, and see if there's, anything we can do in the short term, short of, a act of the DOT to get something there to solve it, to make it a little more ped safe. But, it doesn't seem like we'll get there with this particular item. So maybe this item, I guess, we don't have to act on this tonight. I think we just need to keep this at top of mind and kind of keep our eye on some of this money, because if it becomes available, we should at least have an idea of where we want to go. And it sounds like we kind of have that. So I think we can just kind of keep this list on file, and if they tell us in January that we have a little money, we kind of know what we want to think about. Deb, go ahead.
I guess I also wanted to talk about future agenda items. Are we done with 5?
Yes, I have one future agenda item that I'll make you aware of that I believe we're going to bring in January. Alder Killian's been contacted by some downtown residents who are looking for a 2-hour parking restriction near 5th and Franklin. And so we have, Court is looking at that, and I believe we're going to bring that to you for January. I don't have any other ones that I'm aware of, though. Do you have anything?
Well, I guess it's kind of related to item number 1 as well, but I happened to drive by the proposed alley on, what's that, Cedar and Spruce, and went through it, and half of it on the south side seems to be old asphalt, and on the north side seems to be dirt. But from talking to one of the neighbors, it seems that in addition to looking at paving it, it's really getting down to basics. There's springs there. And what the city needs to do to resolve the spring issues, and that I'm going down it myself, there's a number of people that are having sump pumps because of the natural springs in the area, and they're directing their water in their gutters into the alley. And so on the north half, it's just like this little stream of ground being opened up. So I guess I'm just concerned, before making it into a paving issue, is the city need to go back and really address the spring issue in the alley?
Which point at Cedar and
I
Spruce
thought
between,
this
is it
was
7th?
between 10th and 11th and Spruce, no,
I think it's the
Nor-
alley between 9th and 10th.
9th and 10th.
9th and 10th, okay.
Yeah, so this issue was brought to us last year when we were doing Cedar Street. And we actually stubbed out a 12-inch storm pipe to that alley as part of that project on Cedar this year. So that we will be giving property owners some area to tie their sump pumps into.
Okay,
Because the property owners across the alley would complain that the water would just then flow into their property. So this alley project is taking into account those stormwater issues.
right, and it just happened, the neighbor that lived on the block south, she had said that she had slipped on some ice and ended up breaking her hip and didn't report it as such for insurance purposes, but that it looked like there was this just natural water flow of, on the north end that seems to be regarding the springs. So if we can't resolve the springs, it's not going to resolve
Well,
putting
hopefully
that.
that drainage solution will help.
right.
That's huge.
Thank you.
So, okay. All right, so yes, if anything else comes up between meetings, let me know. But we'll have that item from Alder Killian next month, and we'll go forward then from there. I don't have anything else.
Our next meeting will start at 5:30 rather than.
Yes, yep, mark your calendars also, 5:30 start next month. I know that 15 minutes makes all the difference, but, so we should 5:30 start next month. And then with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Larson, is there a second? Second by Ryan. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one ever is. We'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.